Hey everyone, Alex Gordon or Anakin Skywalker, depending on where you're tuning in from. I've got a Denix Mauser DL-44 Empire Strikes Back conversion that I did here. I guess we'll just get right to it. Had this for a while, but finally was able to complete it. Had a rough schedule for the last semester. I'm a fourth year mechanical engineering student, and just being on campus for so many hours last semester and then having to come home and work out and do my homework and all that stuff, it really prevented me from being able to get to my builds. But finally ready to get back to it, as is obvious by presenting a new build. So we'll just start going at it. Down here there's a single 18350 cell. So yes, this is 3.7 volt hacked blaster core 4.0. It sounds really fine in my opinion. You lose supposedly a little bit of volume and clarity when you do a 3.7 volt hack compared to a 7.4 volt. But the blaster core particularly is a good candidate for a hack, because typically you're not using an LED that requires being wired in series and a higher voltage than 3.7 to operate, so which obviously is the case here. So it's again a good candidate for that. Working our way up, I've got a polycarbonate holder, spacer, however you want to call it, bracket in the back here that holds the recharge port and the aux switch, which 1.3 millimeter recharge port is here under the kill key, and the aux switch is there. And there is some epoxy in there too, just to make sure that it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to slide left to right, up, down, or back into the gun, which is the worst possible thing that could happen. Working our way up, we've got flattened off pin in the back here. I machined this face right in here where the bolt butts up against, flat, and machined a little bit extra off of it because the bolt never sat flush up at the front. You could see there was a gap there. And for my particular style of doing these, that was a problem because I mill a slot out underneath here, and there's a hole drilled through the barrel for the LED wires. So you could see those wires in the millimeter or 2 millimeters worth of space that was there from the factory. So flattening this up a little bit in the back, it corrected that. And that's just part of really just cleaning up the Denix cast, which is quite awful, but can obviously end up making a pretty dang good replica. Got a magnet underneath the sight here. It's not anything super powerful, but you know, obviously if you really turn the gun really hard, it'll let go, but typically it's going to prevent it from flopping around like they usually do. Made the scope rail myself, found some dimensions on the RPF. They were totally wrong. Figured out how they were wrong, corrected it, posted my findings there, and people were like, no, it's just because you have a Denix. Well, okay, a Denix isn't going to have a difference in the height of the scope rail of 1/4 of an inch from a regular Mauser, so I don't know what they were trying to prove there, but I gave them several opportunities to correct themselves, and they never did. Custom machine spacer under here, and I'm going to go ahead and show you what I did there. Typically, with these, the scope rail is held on with this nut and this threaded rod. Not the case on this one. I wanted it to be really rigid, no chance of being able to spin, as has happened in the past on one that I've done. And you can't thread the wall, the zinc or whatever pot metal this is, wall of the gun, and expect it to be able to tighten really hard and hold this scope rail in place. It's too much to ask for the metal that this gun's made out of. So what I did was to spread the load out more evenly in the spacer, which is an accurate spacer. I have all the reference pictures to go over that. There's these 3 screws that hold the scope rail to the spacer itself, and then there's 3 screws in the gaps here in the spacer that hold the spacer to the gun itself. So it spreads out the load the farthest that it can, and it prevents it from spinning forward or backward, however you want to assume that it would spin. And it came out really well. Nice powder coated thing here. This is the only thing on the whole gun that I'm not happy with, and we talked about it, and there's not really anything I can do because I tried it several times, and it was no problem for me to try several times, but apparently if you try to knurl a taper, you just get this weird spiraled pattern. I'm not sure how Scott Jua was able to do it. I talked to him about it, and he said he didn't have any problems doing it, but I tried it quite a few times, and it's just the geometry of the taper is what causes that spiral, and there's not really anything you can do to prevent it. One day I might end up machining one on a 4th axis CNC, and I'll send one to this client, but as of today I don't really have a way to produce a better one than this, so we just sort of left it as is. Again, that's the only thing I'm not quite happy with, and I'm not quite sure why it worked out that way, but it just sort of did, and it was really weird to me. What else? Real scope supplied by the customer. I milled out, obviously I didn't mention it earlier, this ejector pin, port, whatever this area is on the real Mauser. I machined that detail in. Flash hider, I got all of the stupid clear or gray or silver or whatever color anodizing was on it off. Please, anyone that's going to machine aluminum parts, do not ever have them clear or gray or silver anodized or whatever you think it's going to do. Don't do it. If you do it, at least make sure you're going to say specifically, hey everybody, just so you know, these are anodized, so don't try to buff any scratches out of them or you'll ruin the whole finish, because that's what always happens to me on a clear or gray or whatever anodized part. I'm a perfectionist, you know, and with some of these props you want them to be weathered, but you still don't want there to be any obvious flaws with them. So for me, it's easier for me to just sand something down and put a really nice machine looking finish on it than it is to sit there and ignore a flaw. So when you try to do that and there's a clear or a gray or a silver anodize on there and you don't know it, you ruin the finish of the anodized coating, however you want to say it, and then you have to completely remove all of the anodizing in order to make the finish homogeneous again. Really annoying. Obviously, it's one of my big pet peeves, in case you couldn't tell from that little rant, but I did remove it. I did weather this the way that I wanted to. I got this weathering just about perfect from the prop pictures that I have. Weathered inside of here a little bit. This is not a through barrel, because I have to drill through here for the wires. What this actually is a it's an extra insert piece to look like the end of the barrel would. I bored down into the flash hider here a little bit. Obviously machined that part, secured it in there. Because again, I do LEDs in here, so I have to drill through this barrel, which means I can't have the barrel be ridiculously long, or I'll need a drill bit with flutes that are that long that gets through the barrel. So let's go ahead and fire it up. Sound vents are under here. There's one down here and there's one up here. It's quite loud. Unless you really know where the sound vents are, you can sort of see them there. You can't really find them. That was about the best that could be done. So pull the kill key out, simple kill key, nothing's fancy, just low profile. Aux switch back here. Main flash. And as you could see there, or you could hear, the hammer goes off, and the trigger will not go off before the hammer does. And in fact, you can do that just because it's necessary. When you pull the hammer back, the trigger moves, as you can see. So you have to set up your switch in such a way that pulling the hammer back doesn't activate the board, but pulling the trigger does. So just pull the trigger like you mean it, and you're not going to run into any issues. Let's go ahead and there's the blue. Obviously it has sound fonts just like all the rest of the Blaster Core builds always do. There's 6 in there that you can change between. And then obviously all the different levels, and you can set it to jam and all this stuff. It's really, really cool. But the simple blasters like this, and simple, ones that aren't really E11 based, or you know, EE3, something like that, that's rather large, you'd end up not using quite a bit of those features because, number one, it's not really accurate to use that. Like, you don't need a select fire switch on this or a bar graph. And number two, because there's just not really that much room. And I mean, sure, if someone really wanted it, I'm sure I could fit a ray progression and a bar graph and all of that stuff in here, maybe everything besides a screen, but it just doesn't make sense. This is a Han Solo blaster, that's what you're going to get. Or I guess Luke Skywalker as well, depending on who you talk to and who decides which flash hider is accurate for that blaster. But anyway, I believe that's it. Again, I'm going to emphasize this runs on 3.7 volts, so when this gets charged, make sure it's charged on 3.7 volts. And yeah, I think that's it. So thanks for watching, everyone, and talk to you later.